supporting. Midlands Innovation is a partnership of 8 research-intensive universities. We collaborate to drive cutting-edge research, innovation and skills development that will grow the high-tech, high-skilled economy of the Midlands in the UK, and through that, help level up the R&D investment that flows into the Midlands region. The Energy Research Accelerator is one of our most successful collaborative programmes, with around 1,400 academics working to find new solutions to the challenge of net zero through the development of low carbon energy solutions and the reduction of carbon emissions. Today we're going to be joined by Professor Trevor Macmillan, who's the Vice-Chancellor for Keele University and is the Chair of the Midlands Innovation Board. We're also joined by Adam Morton, who's a Chair of Sustainable Aviation and Head of Environmental Technology for Rolls-Royce plc. Adam works with us, sitting on the Industrial Advisory Board for the Energy Research Accelerator, an example of the many ways in which we work on our projects in collaboration. Both will be sharing their views and experience of how innovative collaboration can drive forward the green agenda. Following their talks, we'll have an expert panel discussion with representatives drawn from a range of organisations and disciplines to reflect on the challenges and opportunities posed by collaboration in relation to net zero. Responding to the climate crisis and achieving net zero, or our UK's net zero ambition by 2050, requires much more than just simply investing in green technologies. The UK's vision to become a science superpower and the government's 10-point plan highlight the need for additional skills and the integration of ideas at both a regional, a national and a global scale. Collaboration between universities, academics from all disciplines, in partnership with industry, with government and with regional stakeholders, is vital for innovations to be successfully adopted. And for Midlands Innovation, this isn't a new concept. We've been working collaboratively for years and have achieved some incredible things, creating 23 new and novel research and demonstration facilities looking at low carbon energy solutions, and putting the Midlands at the heart of the energy innovation landscape through our Energy Research Accelerator is just one example. But more importantly, we want to look forwards and consider how we can better fight the climate crisis together. Today we're launching MI Planet, which showcases the breadth of research and research expertise across the Midlands Innovation universities and the opportunities that expertise brings industry, civic and government stakeholders. We hope that this event will kickstart a wider conversation in the run-up to COP26 and beyond, as we all work together to achieve net zero. So to start us off, here's a short video which sets the scene for today's discussion.
This is the time to speak, to search, to fight, to act. Will you stand by or stand up? Will you be remembered for what you missed or what you did? Will you feel regret or pride? Midlands Innovation is already acting. Collaborating, 8 universities, thousands of academics, unrivaled capabilities. World-class research facilities in sustainable energy, transport, health, food, manufacturing. We're collaborating with cities, businesses and people. Innovating. Fighting climate change through the UK's largest energy research partnership. We have expertise in green energy, generation, storage, use from waste. Decarbonising road, air and rail travel. Respiratory health, Earth observation, clean, sustainable water. Sharing expertise. 1,400 researchers in energy technologies, 1,800 researchers in transport. We're disrupting, bringing new technologies to market, real-time flood mapping, air pollution monitoring on a global scale. Demonstrating. Our campuses are living labs, shaping the futures of industry, the Midlands, the UK and the planet. This can't be the work of one university, one academic or one vision. Individually we're strong, but together we're stronger. With your support, my planet will go further, faster. We've chosen to act. Are you with us? Midlands Innovation, stronger together. Together, we can achieve net zero.
Thank you, and I hope you all agree with the sentiment that together we're stronger and that we need to collaborate to tackle challenges such as net zero. And I'm delighted to hand over to Professor Trevor McMillan, who, as I said before, is the Vice-Chancellor of Keele University and the current Chair of Midlands Innovation. He acts as a knowledge exchange champion for Research England, and recently Keele University was named Global Sustainability Institution of the Year. Later on, he'll be leading our panel discussion, and now he's going to talk to us about how successful collaboration is important in the context of achieving net zero.
Thank you very much, Helen. Are we moving across? Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here, and as Helen said, wearing three hats this afternoon: Vice-Chancellor at Keele, Chair of the Midlands Innovation Board, and Knowledge Exchange Champion for Research England. And hopefully that can take the conversation through an institutional view, then creating even more benefit from universities working with each other onto those broader national and global impact that can come from that broader level of collaboration. I think the fact that you're here today would suggest that you would agree to me that there is no problem more important than climate change that needs this collaborative approach. And there are few problems that are more complex, so it absolutely requires a range of approaches and expertise. Universities can have a unique role in this, in that we have got that broad expertise and we can make that input. And also we can act as a convener of critical networks to address specific aspects of the problem. This is a confusing problem for many individuals and organisations, even once climate change is an issue that they recognise as being a problem that they want to do something about. So we, with partners, can also be an important conduit and support in these situations. At Keele, we're committed to sustainability, and it's been fantastic in the last few weeks to be recognised globally for our achievements following the award of Global University of the Year for Sustainability. I'm not going to say too much about Keele, except that we do see a thread of sustainability through everything we do. And thanks to innovative collaborations based on trusted partnerships across industry and the public sector, we, for example, have reduced our carbon emissions by 39%, exceeding our 2020 target. The most visible element of this will be 2 wind turbines and 12,500 solar panels and a mega battery that are currently being installed in work with Engie, with whom we're also working on the design of a smart local energy system that will demonstrate how to reduce carbon and energy costs for residents while providing a catalyst for town regeneration and employment creation. Our approach is also exemplified by our Smart Energy Network demonstrator that is acting as an at-scale living laboratory through which we are managing energy generation, distribution, storage, forecasting, and energy balancing across different energy sources from our campus. This was installed through a fantastic collaboration with Siemens, and one of the first major projects in SEND has been HyDeploy, that has been done with Cadent, Northern Gas Networks, ITM Power, Progressive Energy, and the Health and Safety Executive. This project tested a 20% hydrogen blend solution, which, if rolled out across the country, could save around 6 million tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions every year, which is the equivalent of taking 2.5 million cars off the road. But of course, our region has been leading the green energy revolution for many years. So it's no surprising that the Midlands employs around 1/3 of the people in the UK's energy sector. That's over 56,000 regional jobs. The Midlands Innovation Energy Research Accelerator is a 5-year programme established in 2016 in partnership across our 8 partner universities and the British Geological Survey. It has achieved some significant successes, and they include, for example, the Trent Basin housing development in Nottingham, and that's a key large-scale demonstrator project. Once complete, it will feature 500 houses and a primary school across a 250-acre brownfield regeneration site. The £100 million scheme, now starting its third phase of build, is also the site of a transformational energy project that hosts one of Europe's largest community energy batteries. The project aims to develop a business model that meets government sustainable living targets in a way which is financially stable and future-proof. The Energy Innovation Centre at WMG at the University of Warwick is now a world-leading centre for battery development and testing. This provided a basis for the subsequent £130 million UK Battery Industrialisation Centre and has laid the foundation for a future gigafactory investment. The Tyseley Energy Park in Birmingham has transformed a former industrial site into a state-of-the-art energy park. It's now installed a low-carbon vehicle refuelling station and also plans to link waste heat generated on site to the City of Birmingham district heating system. A common thread in all of these ERA activities has been that they are delivered collaboratively with business and regional stakeholders, and this is a key part of the ethos around the ERA. As part of this, ERA has also helped shape the strategic plan to accelerate the Midlands and UK towards net zero that is being published as the Midlands Engine 10-point plan for green growth. And that provides a pathway for converting opportunities into reality and driving economic and environmental impact. The plan marks the first time that a unified vision has been proposed for the Midlands in order to deliver a greener future for its communities. So we hope that all of this will help achieve the net zero target that was made before the pandemic. But of course, the current economic landscape and the recovery presents us with even more challenges to consider when delivering real-world solutions to climate change. In that context, the exchange of knowledge, resources and expertise has never been more important, which is exactly what we're committed to doing within Midlands Innovation. The biggest challenges we face cannot now be tackled alone within our individual institutions. Collectively, our 8 universities have an excellent track record of collaborating, but we know that successful collaboration and real innovation comes from engaging with an even more diverse breadth of individuals and institutions in both the public and the private sectors. Net Zero Week is an opportunity to engage bright young minds in the conversation. Our student communities and spin-out businesses encourage new ways of thinking, whilst we also need the expertise and infrastructure of large institutions, coupled with the support and influence from government. Our regional academic network is connected to a national and even global infrastructure across HE, research and industry. And it is vital that our attempts to collaborate and can be seen to be meeting net zero targets. And ultimately that was seen to add value to our communities and to create change which is sustainable in the current landscape. So we are committed to supporting other organisations in their own programmes towards a low carbon future. At Keele, for example, we support many local authorities in their climate emergency plans, as well as helping individual businesses develop their sustainability plans. Our research strength in the Midlands Innovation is at the heart of what we can contribute, but our education and knowledge exchange strengths sit alongside this to make sure that our impact is amplified through making sure that our students and our partners are also able to engage with this critical global issue. So if you want to learn more about the work we at Midlands Innovation are delivering and the opportunities to collaborate, please do visit midlandsinnovation.org.uk and sign up to our newsletter. So thank you for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I really look forward to the rest of the session, including the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Now we'll move on and I'll hand over to Adam Morton, who is Head of Environmental Technology for Rolls-Royce and Chair of Sustainable Aviation. And he's going to give us a business perspective on the importance of collaboration in relation to climate change and net zero. So,
thank you very much, Helen. Thank you. When I was asked to say a few words at the event today, I thought back to my first experience or my first engagement with Midlands Innovation, which actually goes back about 10 years or so through the Energy Technology Institute. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the ETI was a coalition of industry and government, effectively with a budget of up to £600 million to invest in developing those decarbonisation technologies that would allow the UK to meet its 2050 targets, which at the time was an 8% reduction compared with a 1990 baseline. I think one of the important reasons for mentioning this is that much of the learning that we gained in relation from the Energy Technology Institute is concerned with an appreciation that you can learn a great deal from examining the decarbonisation work that's gone ahead in the past and then looking for certain themes. And certainly I think it's safe to say that energy is slightly further forward in that process, certainly in the UK, where we've seen the transition away from a generation grid that's predominantly coal and nuclear to one that for a time was dominated by gas-fired CCGTs, high efficiency ones, but increasingly is being characterised by increasing amounts of offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar power. And this transition actually provides other insights too. Firstly, we don't always know how far and how fast the decarbonisation is likely to be. Certainly when we started the process at the ETI back in 2007, we were targeting as I've said, an 80% reduction relative to a 1990 target. And actually it's over a relatively short period of time that we've seen, possibly as little as 3 or 4 years, the transition towards a recognition that net zero by 2050 is the way to go. Something MI and ERA are addressing at Kiel right now is the importance of understanding how the different technologies fit into a wider portfolio of low cost technologies. It was right here in the Midlands, first at Loughborough and more recently through the work of the Energy System Catapult at split across Derby and Birmingham, that we started to develop the concept of the energy system modelling environment, the ESME model, which represented a whole energy system model which looked to identify possible lowest total system cost portfolios that could deliver not only on net zero but could do so at a cost that would minimise the economic impact of that transition. With better understanding of these sorts of models, it's been possible to understand how the different technologies fit together. And in a field close to both my day job and also my role at Sustainable Aviation, it's recognised that very rarely in any single sector does a single silver bullet exist. When the Sustainable Aviation Coalition published its net zero plan in September of last year, it concluded a number of things. It concluded that no single solution is sufficient. It also concluded that we can't tax our way out of the problem. Carbon tax, even at relatively high levels, certainly as high as £220 per tonne, only has a relatively modest impact on the total amount of carbon emitted. Of the 70 million tonnes or so that we would have expected without constraints in aviation in 2050, it accounts for approximately 4 million tonnes of that. At the same time, sustainable fuels derived from a variety of different feedstocks and a variety of different processes contribute about 14 million tonnes of the 70 million tonnes or so that are necessary to be removed. And even then, that leaves us with a relatively large proportion that has to be addressed through those remaining options. All Rolls-Royce and SA work to date suggests that in a way, more efficient engines and more efficient aircraft will become more important, because by increasing the efficiency of those conversion technologies and those platforms, and by minimizing the amount of fuel burnt, we can also minimize the transition costs for the end users and accelerate the pace at which these technologies can start to have the impact that they so richly deserve to have. There is also some evidence that the fuel ambitions that SA had a few years ago are already starting to look less ambitious than they appeared at the time, with scope for approximately 100% of jet fuel to be SAF in 2050, with the addition of advanced waste gasification and Fischer-Tropsch techniques, but also the coming online of things like power to liquids and e-fuels. However, the cost of these is likely to remain higher, or for much of the time horizon out to 2050, and therefore development of more efficient conversion technologies, engines, gas turbines, and cools to reduce fuel consumption will be increasingly important. And I'm pleased to see that this is actually something that's been incorporated into the work being done by the universities within the MI remit. Clearly, these contributions include or are supplemented by air traffic management and offset and market-based measures, and this latter clearly provides an opportunity for economists and policy developers, but also as we go forwards in time, those market-based measures will be underpinned by technological offsets, which will have much more in common with some of the technologies that are being developed to address things like direct air capture, carbon capture and storage. And it's extremely likely that some of the chemistry and the physics and the materials engineering that's being done in the academic institutions in the Midlands will be finding their way into these DACs and BEC technologies, which ultimately will deliver a large proportion of any remaining out of sector decarbonisation. For smaller aircraft travelling shorter distances, it's important to recognise that in addition to improvements in engine technologies, improvement in aircraft technologies, and the emergence of new sustainable aviation fuels, we'll see increasing importance for things like electrification and hydrogen propulsion. And again, I'm heartened to see that actually some of the work that's being done in the MI group at the moment is potentially able to find its way not only into land-based applications, but also into applications in areas which are a little bit closer to my work at Rolls-Royce. Sustainable fuels, when the cost benefit is covered in terms of carbon alone, appear to be relatively expensive compared with the incumbent. If non-carbon benefits are also considered, for instance, the opportunity to reduce non-carbon emissions such as NOx, sulfur dioxide and particulates, and also to enjoy benefits in terms of reduced repair and overhaul inputs, then suddenly the commercial attractiveness starts to improve, and we start to close the affordability gap so much more quickly than would otherwise be the case. And one of the things that we would hope to see from academic institutions across the country and from the Midlands in particular is to understand how some of the decarbonisation solutions that are being considered at the moment can actually have additional benefits beyond conventional greenhouse gases, such as local air quality, and in some circumstances, certainly in the case of electrification, potential benefits in terms of noise. It's important to recognise that none of these benefits are baked in. Government support is likely to be necessary in a number of forms. In some cases, that government support will be necessary in the form of policy and regulation, and certainly there's a lot to do for the UK government and governments around the world in order to encourage both the production and deployment of these new low carbon technologies. but in some areas, investment within research and development is also likely to be extremely important. This is possibly one of the most important jobs for groupings such as MI, and that's to communicate to governments the importance of these technologies and how they can achieve a number of different objectives. One is to protect existing jobs. A second one is to create new jobs, and certainly the work of E4Tech on sustainable fuels over the last 12 months has identified the potential for creation of large numbers of jobs across 7 clusters and 14 different projects, something of the order of £1 billion worth of gross value added, and considerably more if we start to then look at the export opportunities. And finally, and an area I'm particularly interested is that by giving the UK the technology to decarbonise in a way that is both efficient in terms of its deployment of capital, but also is socially equitable, the UK then has that opportunity to export that expertise globally as we start to look to see how we can find new sources of soft power as the UK looks to become the global Britain that we're so keen to have as we come out of globalization. And at that point, I'll hand you back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. It's good to look back to the times of the Energy Technologies Institute, which, as you rightly said, was a really impressive collaborative endeavour. Also great to hear from you about the huge range of technology innovations required, aligning, as you said, to a number of strengths within the Midlands Innovation Partnership already, and benefiting from a collaborative approach with government and with universities. And I'm sure we'll continue to try and work with you and others on communicating the importance of these technologies in supporting the Midlands economy and addressing climate change solutions as we go forwards. We'll now move on to our panel discussion, where we've got a number of experts joining us to have a conversation around the importance of innovative collaboration in addressing net zero. So I'll hand over to Trevor, who's going to lead this part of the session.
Okay, thanks again, Helen. Again, good to see the panel and hopefully build on some of the things that Adam's been talking about. What I'm going to do is first of all ask each member of the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll start discussing some of the issues that I think have been raised in the last half hour or so. So if I go around, Faye, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So hi, I'm Faye McAnulla. I'm the Programme Director for the Energy Research Accelerator, which much has been said about already today. I've got a background of about 20 years in energy, low carbon and cities. And particularly during that time, I've worked really across the boundaries. I've worked in industry, working with NGOs, I've worked in academia, and I've worked in consultancy. But what I would say about all of those roles is that I've spent a lot of time collaborating externally with different groups of organisations. So happy to join the talk today.
Okay, thanks, Faye. And Alistair?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alistair. I'm a professor in mechanical engineering at the University of Nottingham, and I sit on the Midlands Innovation Transport Advisory Group. I've got about, again, 20 years experience, partly in industry. I worked for a consultancy called Marla Powertrain, managing large collaborative R&D in powertrain. For the last 10 years, I've helped look after what we call the Powertrain Research Centre at Nottingham. So we do a lot of research on heavy duty, low carbon fuels and engines. We do work on batteries, thermal management, and also a lot of work on electrification in general. So that's me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Thanks, Alistair. Julian.
Afternoon, everyone. Julian Barry. I'm regional manager for the East Midlands and South East Midlands, so I include Cranfield in my patch. For Innovate UK, we're the nation's innovation agency, and we have a really close interest in pursuing net zero through a range of challenges that we're currently funding on behalf of government. Also, we're part of UKRI, So things like the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund are collaborative ventures between the research councils, part of UKRI, and the innovation working with business parts of UKRI. So hopefully we're making a real contribution to, for example, Adam talking about the need for government funding and support, then we're it.
Okay, I think we might come back to that question if we go through. Thanks, Julian. Avi.
Oh, hello. I'm Avi, the co-founder and chief operating officer of Pre-Visico. We are a flood forecasting company that spun out of Loughborough University in January 2019, following about 2 decades of R&D into a new form of flood forecasting at the university. Initially funded by Innovate UK, so thank you very much, Julian, and your team for that. And yeah, looking forward to this panel. Okay,
thanks, Avi. And Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Vandehei. I'm an academic at University of Leicester. I have a broad interest in environmental science, everywhere from monitoring to applications to human health. I also have a background in industry prior to that, in environmental sensing, which was supported back and then through a KTP from the TSB, while we're saying thank you to Julian. So I have sort of a few different hats. I lecture in environment and health. I sit as science co-director on the UK Space Agency's Centre for Earth Observation Instrumentation, which develops the technology pipeline for future satellites. And then I'm part of our Centre for Environmental Health and Sustainability at the University of Leicester, where I have a knowledge mobilization role to get science and evidence out to stakeholders, but conduct those in partnership. And so I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about partnership and consider, for example, in decarbonization, how we think about the broader environmental and socioeconomic benefits and challenges. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So hopefully you can see there in the panel, we've got a wide range of expertise. So hopefully we'll hear quite different perspectives on the questions that we're going to try and address. I think the first of those really comes in part from something I mentioned earlier on, which is the idea that this is such a big problem that every organisation in the area, in the country, in the world is thinking about what their own strategy should be for addressing the sustainability issues. And I guess the question therefore comes is whether there's a danger of the approach towards net zero being very fragmented and not joined up. So I wonder if the panel members have a view on how we might best increase the amount of collaboration and the thinking and the working together to try and make sure that all of this effort is actually all pointing in the same direction so that we get maximum benefit. So Faye, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. So on this one, I guess I've got a few thoughts. I think it's great, as you just said, that every organisation pretty much now is really thinking about what it can do in terms of net zero. I know when I started my career and wanted to work in this area, it was quite hard to find organisations that were really sort of taking the grasp of the nettle, I guess. And I think as well, when I think about it from a sort of place-based point of view, really each area has got a different set of challenges. It's got a different set of assets and it's a different set of expertises. And I was thinking that if you compared the Midlands to somewhere like Teesside, you've obviously got a really different set of sort of challenges and criteria. You've got in the Midlands lots of SMEs interested in the low carbon area. You've got a really strong R&D base, and you've got sectors such as automotives and transport being really key. And then in Teesside, you've obviously got the heavy industry, gas and wind being kind of key areas. So I guess it's really important that each area and each set of organisations does have its own approach that is really based on its groundings. But it is also really important that we come together and work out how to do these things together. one of the things that we've been involved in the last sort of 9 months or so is developing the Green Growth Action Plan for the Midlands in collaboration with the Midlands Engine. And I think that that's been really important in bringing together certainly a Midlands scale, which I think is a really helpful scale to be thinking about these challenges at. Has been to bring together those challenges and to get people to work collaboratively and bring together. So one of the things that we're doing at the minute is developing a hydrogen task force, and bringing those organisations together that are really interested in that topic is a way of developing a collaboration. And I guess that is also something similar to how we've approached ERA over the last 5 years, in that we've been trying to bring together key organisations that are interested in particular challenges and really sort of fast tracking those through into commercialisation. So I think that would be my approach.
Okay, great, thanks, Faye. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. So my background's in transport, so predominantly that's where my interests lie, really. And I think when you look at it regionally, there certainly are opportunities and challenges almost equally. If we look at passenger car, for example, I think we're all in agreement that they'll probably electrify en masse across where we can in developed areas. And the infrastructure is already coming hand in hand with that, slowly but surely. The interesting thing for me is where it plays out in the next 10 years with passenger cars. We're going to need ultra fast charging, and a lot is hinged on the battery technology. So, you know, can we have solid state batteries in the future, for example, that you can charge quickly, or do we have to cool lithium ion batteries very quickly and charge them as quickly as we can? And if you're doing that, how do you do it? So I think passenger cars are relatively foreseen. You know, the glide way for passenger cars is there. The interesting one for me is heavy duty. And in particular, when you look at heavy duty, I'm talking across the board. So everything from small trucks, freight rail, marine, flight. There is no silver bullet technology. There is no single solution. And it holds so true for heavy duty because of the demands you have there. And actually, I think regionally, that's where we have strength in the Midlands. We are the golden triangle for logistics. So most of the logistics companies have got centres along the M1, across into Birmingham. We've got great opportunity to help decarbonise in that area. And I think there is a danger, I think, of it becoming too fragmented, particularly when you look beyond regional and look national and even global. So, for example, it's probable that we might import some green hydrogen into the country that's been produced via solar somewhere else. An example I'd give you is in Australia. There's the Asian Renewable Energy Hub, which I think is 26 gigawatts of green ammonia that's going to be exported. So I'm sure that won't be the only initiative that sprouts up. So I think the opportunity's there, but I think it has to be put in both a national and global setting to make sure that we get to as close to net zero as we can in as short a time as we can.
Okay. Thanks, Alistair. Alistair, can I just very quickly come back to you and this is a question from an ignorant biologist who rather than an engineer, so forgive me. But so even within the transport sort of sector, and you talked about the different areas of whether it be domestic, sort of local, and or bigger, is there enough joining up between those of learning, or is there even within that sort of constraint the risk that technologies won't be shared enough between the different areas?
It's a critical thing. So having worked in propulsion and with propulsion companies, you know, most of our industry, most of our research is industry sponsored. There is a trend towards realizing that we need to look at the full life cycle impacts of products. And I think we have to do that up front of anything that we do in the future to fully get there to the right answer without hiccups. Because if you go off and just look at end use, you know, using fuels, I think you'll probably find there was some unwanted unknowns that come up and give you a cropper. So I think it's about having the right tools to get to the right answer for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Julian.
I think it's really interesting. So if you look at the sort of a policy perspective, we're at some stage we'll have the spending review, the innovation policy, and it feels like we're in a moment where government is moving from innovation should be primarily private sector and state only intervenes when there's evidence of market failure, to one that is a lot more both around, although they don't say it, the state's role in promoting innovation in key sectors, the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, but also, as we've seen quite recently up in the Northeast, government making really big investments to make sure that critical bits of kit come, which isn't about innovation, it's just making sure we have battery or satellite capacity or whatever. So I think it's really interesting from a government point of view, the way in which policy is going, and colleagues will take a view about whether that's a belated recognition that joining up is needed and is happening, or whether it's a slightly why are they getting involved in here because it's not needed. I think from an Innovate point of view, then although colleagues have been very kind in saying Innovate gave us money and will continue to give you money, provided you earn it and you've got a great business case, I need to say that obviously. A lot of what we do is about helping people make connections, whether that's connections between research institutions like yours and business, or whether it's with our catapults that bring that together, or whether it's the knowledge transfer network, which is bringing together sector experts. So we think collaboration is really important, but also we think collaboration is really important if there is a logic to it. So whether that's there is a business need on the part of our business because we don't have that capacity in-house, or from a wider perspective, as I think Alistair was saying, EVs is an infrastructure problem, it's a financing problem, it's a technology problem, it's a societal problem. And that's when we need collaboration rather than just scrambling around for a dozen or more collaborators because it ticks a box.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Avi.
So I guess from our perspective, we've been involved in sustainability, but less from a CO2 reduction standpoint. I mean, from a CO2 reduction standpoint, we've been looking at ourselves, but we are just an SME. So fortunately, we don't have that many emissions yet, but I think it's important for every business to both look at themselves and also their suppliers and their partners and kind of encourage each other to take action. I mean, from ourselves, obviously having everyone in the company involved in that. So looking across the company at what we can reduce and having a target to go beyond net zero. But I think what our focus has really been on is then looking at kind of the wider sustainability piece, which for us is especially on resilience and seeing how organizations can be a lot more resilient as we go ahead, because again, sustainability is actually, it's such a wide ranging theme across organizations, and there's all sorts of different activities that you can do. And I can sometimes feel for people in charge of sustainability, because you might initially have one big target and then you suddenly realize you have several other aspects of work you suddenly need to get involved with. So we've been trying to help with that and see again how organizations can become more resilient, because that's a really crucial part of that moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Ali. I mean, can I, obviously with your background, I can't help but mention what's been happening in Germany and Belgium over the last few days, and I guess a question there around, putting almost the energy aside for a second. Again, the collaboration in all aspects of, as you say, the climate impact and those networks, in particular for an SME. How do you build those networks in order to learn from what's happening in another part of the world to build on your experience? Do those networks exist, or is that another important role for universities to provide some of those conduits by which organizations and companies like yours can actually sort of spread out, both in terms of what you do, but also learning from others?
I think, yeah, it's a really good question. I think universities obviously have several roles to play, but one of the ones that they have done quite well over the years is on expertise. So, for example, Hannah Cloak, kind of professor in meteorology from Reading University, wrote a really good article on some of the challenges that led to that disaster occurring, and that was in the conversation and being widely picked up by the media and kind of picked up on over the last couple of days. But then there's a second part, which is on, well, the private enterprises and the kind of spin-outs from universities and what they can contribute. And that's where I think there's always more work that can be done, because there's a lot of solutions out there, but you just need to understand which ones are appropriate for the right situation. So I think it's sharing the expertise is one thing, but there's a lot more, especially on, well, actually identifying the right solutions and bringing that together.
Yeah. Okay. And Josh.
Yeah, I also think this is really interesting and important question. I think this phrase, tagline, whatever you want to call it, think global, act local, has actually been around for more than 100 years in town planning arenas. I like the sort of act globally, act locally version, which came out again, it's still a few decades ago, but I like that. So what does that mean? I think in the areas I work with, I think that local data, everywhere you go in the world, local data is really important. Local understanding of local problems. We see this in environmental health. We know a lot about air pollution exposure and its effects on human health, but everywhere you go to talk about developing new policies, people want to say, well, what's our local mortality burden, our local morbidity burden? What do we do about it? And you can't just export learning from one place to another. So I think there is a real case for embedding the local evidence base with the local policy framework. I really think that's important. In Leicester, we do several projects. We're working with City Council, for example, on projects relating both to air pollution and to climate. We're going to be putting in a network of air quality and CO2 sensors across the city, which is quite novel. And everyone we talk to is quite, they really want to understand as much as this is possible. I can give you a separate talk about how can you work out what your local emissions really are, but we're stepping in that direction. And there's so much enthusiasm for that. So I think absolutely we have to act locally. We have to also facilitate the ability to innovate. And I think at the local scale, you can potentially do that much faster. Now, at the same time, it comes back to some of the comments we already heard about life cycle, broader consequences. We have to keep that systems picture in focus. So, we come up with our local, let's say, battery design. We manufacture it in the Midlands, but we have to import materials. There's there's carbon involved. There are environmental degradations potentially happening. There are labor fairness issues. Then we use the technology here. Afterwards, we have to think about the disposal. We have to think about potential environmental impacts and environmental health impacts. And so it's, I think everybody is aware in the circles that I'm talking about this about the importance of systems thinking and systems solutions. I think we have so much work to do, and there's a lot of opportunity at the research base, industry, government interface to really figure out how do you really step back and bring that systems map into focus. So I think that's my 2 cents.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I think as part of all of this, obviously, inevitably, we end up thinking about funding. And one of the things I've certainly been very conscious of over the last couple of years in particular is that as public, i.e. government funding for various things, it's actually changing directions, whether you look at a regional level. I happen to be in a part of the country which is benefiting already from some of the levelling up funds, whether that be Town Deal, whether it be community renewal funds. And then they're not huge funds in the scale of things, but actually have the ability to get some of the messages home and getting more organizations on board. So I guess there is a big question as to how we as a research community actually can add value to some of that public investment that is going on in different ways and in different areas, not just from within UKRI, but from other parts of government as well. I'm going to change the order a little bit on this one, and Julian, I'm going to give you the opportunity to get your response in first, because otherwise everybody will ask you for money and you'll feel like you've got to say yes or no. So if I come to you first, then you can give your perspective on that.
Cool. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point you make about levelling up funds, because I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with colleagues in Ashfield, Chesterfield, who are thinking around spending some of that money around innovation. And, you know, I think that's great. And the partnerships that are going on with FE colleges, universities to try and develop more of an ecosystem within those places around innovation and technology is brilliant to see. And I think we will need to think more about that. And certainly, you know, one of the roles of people like me within Innovate is to try and make those connections. Again, you know, lots of talk around levelling up, whether it's UKRI levelling up its funding or government generally. And, you know, we will see what happens in the spending review on that. But I think the key will be, and you know, a number of us are long in the tooth enough to remember that this is not the first time governments have decided to invest in these places to help them improve. So I think there will be something about, as we do that, learning the lessons from the past and to try and make sure that we don't make some of the mistakes that we've made in the past. You know, in particular, I think for me, there's that, it's about connectivity, but it's also about raising the potential and aspirations for people living in places and giving people the opportunity to have good quality jobs in those places rather than commute more easily to Birmingham or Manchester or whatever. I think from an Innovate point of view, then we always get told, you know, you're getting tougher than ever to get money from. If government to give us more money, we always say to Treasury, yes, we could spend it 3 times over and we could spend it really effectively. But, you know, we'll see what Treasury has to say. I think the other thing that our new Chief Exec, you know, Indra, who you met last week, is very keen on is helping companies on that journey. So not just it's about grant, it's about how do we get you to a stage where you can look to other sources of funding so that we're taking companies on a journey. And that's not only a journey in developing their technology, but developing their business generally. So, you know, I'm at an easy time in some ways because everything is up for grabs still, and we'll have to see. But you know, definitely watch this space, both around levelling up and the support that we give directly. And you know, I'm really keen to work with everyone in the region to try and make sure that we get the best from whatever resources that are invested.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So, I mean, we all tend to think about, as we've been discussing up to now, the sort of innovation, the big new technologies. But do you sense that there'll be sort of, in particular around that agenda, almost as much expenditure in getting organisations to implement existing technologies, as well as moving on and developing the new ones?
Undoubtedly, we're definitely starting to change, I think. So particularly in things like the Young Innovator Programme and the Women and in Innovation Programme, there are a lot more people there who want to do social good, who want to tackle key environmental challenges rather than, you know, classic middle-aged bloke, I'm just looking to sell my company to Google for 10 million quid and buy the yacht type thing. So I think we are having to recognise that there is more of a sort of social purpose to a lot of innovative businesses, and we need to respond to that. So, yeah, sorry, I've lost my thread, but yeah, I mean, I think we are trying to respond to those concerns and to be flexible and recognise that the innovation ecosystem is changing and we need to change with it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Julian. Avi, your thoughts on the addition to added value to the public funding?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the points you raised on kind of the networks. And so we've been lucky enough to receive a grant from Catapult to work on a project on flood forecasting in Kenya. And part of the benefit from that was the funds, obviously, but actually a major benefit was also through the ongoing support that they provided us. So they had a lot of workshops with kind of different funders, different organizations to partner up with, and have kind of tried to do everything they can to have sustainability in the project, both in, I guess, in choosing who's going to receive the funding, but then also on sharing with us opportunities that they think we could apply for, and also advising us on how to pitch for those opportunities. So I think that's been really useful. I think, you know, from a government standpoint, I think that Innovate UK, again, as a vehicle is really useful. So we received an Innovate UK loan as well as a grant. So grants are great, but loans, you know, are also really useful because I didn't have anything to, again, take to a bank and say I can secure this loan against my house or anything. So having Innovate UK just to provide that loan, that again wasn't easy to apply for, but again, the government are going to get their money back, and they've, you know, created a lot of jobs in the meantime. So I think more of those. There's a lot of ways that can work, but I do think the other activities that kind of accompany them, like they've done in the catapults, are really useful, and creating kind of ecosystems that really go a long way. So I think, you know, a lot of really good examples to follow.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, I think there's a really big opportunity in this area. So first of all, I think as we move towards zero carbon, well, I hope we see a shift from sort of marginal cost versus marginal benefit analysis to now we're making progress against a hard target. So we have to invest, and somehow we have to measure that differently. So I think the government investment will come, public investment will come. I hope it will. In Midlands Innovation, as a sort of academic, industrial, and policy stakeholders working together, I think, you know, if we were sitting here saying, okay, what happens when we get the Midlands chunk for decarbonization and development? You know, how do we make sure that really does the job that we say it's going to do? And I think I would be very interested. Well, I'd really like to hear what the panelists have to say about this, and talk with others offline. But I would really like to see part of that, you know, 10% of that investment. Imagine you earmark that to create an interdisciplinary cross-sector sort of policy institute across the region. And people, you say we have, I don't know, 100 million pounds, 200 million pounds that we're going to invest in some kind of big infrastructure project in the Midlands. How do we make sure this is going to hit the decarbonization target, the jobs targets, that, you know, all the policy, public health, all the different targets? Well, I think we open it up and we say, okay, put your proposals out there, put them in the public domain. Let's evaluate them in the public domain. Let's deliberate them in the public domain, and let's open up the opportunity for new partnerships to sort of percolate that way. You know, I know it's a little different maybe from what we're used to thinking about, but I really see the value of this sort of separate body who publicly evaluates this, because that feeds back then into how do we do the best innovation? How do we make sure that we give the money to the organizations and partnerships that can really deliver? I think that is worth trying. I'd be interested to hear what others say about that.
Okay, interesting. Thanks, Josh. Faye.
Yeah, that was interesting, Josh. Yeah. So on a sort of similar note, I guess going back to what Julian was saying right at the start, and Trevor, about the various levelling up funds, I think that's great. I think for ERA though, interestingly, I sort of question whether they work at the right scale that we can usefully use, and whether, you know, what we've done really successfully, and in the last phase of ERA we had a return on investment of 9 to 1, so an initial £60 million investment from Innovate led to £450 million worth of combined investment effectively, and an estimated sort of 3 billion in GVA, and 10,000 jobs. But my sort of thought on that is whether you know, the types of funding that's coming through now, whether actually they're the right kind of things to sustain the sort of long-term partnerships that are needed, and also to develop sort of long-term collaborations that we've seen have worked in the past. So that would be my kind of key thoughts on that question, really.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I think it was partly at the root of the question that, you know, the risk is that as the funding regimes change, rather than a concentrated 40 or 50 million pounds on a big project, you get 40 or even 80 lots of £500,000 or £1 million spent around the place, and that will have a benefit. But at some point, somebody's got to ask the question: is that the maximum benefit that can be got out of that amount of money? And I think that's one of the slight tensions we've got within the government funding system at the moment, and we're going to all have to work out how to cope with that, I think. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. So from my own view, I think there's a clear opportunity that we could take advantage of in the UK around the carbon border adjustment mechanism that's coming out in Europe now. So over the last year or so, there's been discussion of having an import tax associated with carbon. So if you make something using a grid that's dirtier, you're looking at up to €50 per tonne of CO2. So actually, I think in the UK, having just done some work in this area with some industrial partners, there's a clear opportunity for us to onshore considerable activities around electrification, because inevitably other countries will clean up their grids and catch up. So if you look at the opportunity for industry players at the moment, there was a tendency towards globalization, so moving things abroad for lower labour rates, etc. Some countries offer improved capex incentives to industry players. The real jewel in the crown for the UK at the moment is our decarbonised grid, and we really have got a head start on that. So I think there's a clear opportunity there to take advantage of that. So it'd be good to see more funding towards onshoring activities for sure. I think otherwise, every proposal we put in nowadays has got both, so we're technical end use, but every proposal does have an aspect of socio-economic analysis with it. And actually in the Midlands, we've obviously got the Economic Observatory, for example. That's a great asset, I think, that we can be taking advantage with regional activities. And it's just one example, really. There's still a disconnect between energy production through to end use. So actually, I think that's the danger, actually, as we move towards net zero. You know, we're actually going to end up making carbon worse before we make it better, if we're not too careful. Certainly where batteries are concerned, you know, it takes a while to get the benefits back. So yeah, that's just some thoughts on that, really, on how to connect it all up.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. So we've had a question from the audience around you all listing your 2 or 3 main things that you think should happen in the next decade in order to help this country to its net zero. But while you're cogitating that a little bit, I want you to I suppose think back to this collaboration and the sort of things that we've been talking about. And Josh has sort of already mentioned an interesting idea as to how some of that might be brought together. So I guess your sort of magic wand moment in terms of what is the collaboration that you would bring together in order to really push on the agenda in a joined up a joined up way, either in your specific part of the addressing the issue or in a broader scale. So Faye, let's start with you.
So on the question about what collaboration I would bring together in the future,
yeah,
what I think is that, and what I found really encouraging in the last year or two, is a number of SMEs that are really active now in this area, really actively looking for the kind of rewards around in being involved in sort of R&D and new technologies. So I think it's great to have those involved. The other thing, though, I think that as we try and move from some of the sort of lower technology readiness levels to getting some products and services out into commercialization, I think that the universities working in a more of an ecosystem way with organizations such as venture capital and the SMEs to really, really try and push that across the kind of valley of death zone would be a really, really key set for me. And then the other group that I'd really like to sort of mention and doesn't tend to get mentioned in these kind of discussions is the civic side of things. We often think of innovation being really business focused, and I think that was part of the discussion earlier that Julian was mentioning. But I really think that if you think about how much money gets spent in the civic sector on low carbon and where a lot of the management of these issues is held, more engagement with the civic sector is really important. And what we've been doing at ERA is engaging with the Midlands Energy Hub, who are working across all of the LEPs in the region and trying to work with them on how to push technologies out through the regional bodies in the area, as well as through the SMEs and the business and the larger industries of which we've always worked with.
Okay, thanks, Faye. Josh.
Yeah, so I think a couple things on the sort of what can local regional authorities do. A really interesting example is something I've seen in Durham County. They have sort of it's basically a publicly managed venture capital fund, about £20 million, and I think you could do something really interesting if you had innovation supported where somehow you required systems, some broader context of connecting your solution to the broader system as part of that. Don't ask me how that would work, but I think I really am fascinated by this idea of, wow, a county could manage a venture capital fund, Midlands Innovation could do it. I think that is something we could explore to think about how to get especially new ideas tested quickly. The other thing that I think about, and this builds a little bit on what Faye was saying, is there's a heck of a lot going on in our local authorities and elsewhere across the government sector. And there are some mechanisms that we're using in research, like at the lower level. So for example, I supervised one PhD with a collaborator at University of Birmingham in collaboration with the Environment Agency. That's through Natural Environment Research Council. I supervised another one that's starting off, again, with my collaborator at Birmingham, working with Leicester City Council. These are sort of on air quality related policy research. And so we have these mechanisms where you can actually formally get multiple universities across the Midlands supervising, and you can get partners informally as case partners. So these are small, but I'm interested in how we can grow that across the consortium. So I think, I think those are the two ideas I have on, how can we build on our relationships we have to do something a bit bigger.
Okay, thank you. It is interesting because you'll be aware Midlands Innovation's had a project for the last 3 or 4 years under a government scheme around collaborating over commercialisation. The project's called Micro, and I think that's looking now, well, A, to raise some funds, but also as to what its next phase of existence would look like, and some interesting ideas here around both having the money, but also the support structure around allowing people to know what to do and to access that money in a sensible way. So we'll have to make a note of that one. Alistair.
I was just going to say something along the exact same lines, Trevor. So you've set me up quite nicely there. So I think there's a clear opportunity for SMEs in the Midlands. The bulk of our employees in the region are actually in SMEs. You know, they've got a large part to play. And one thing that's been clear to us over the last couple of years is cross-sector opportunities. So some SMEs will tend to have been siloed in single sectors focused on specific areas. And I think net zero actually brings a lot of opportunity for those SMEs to think bigger across sectors. So there's definitely something to go at there, especially when you think about Industry 4.0. So this is the trend towards digital manufacturing, more automated, more flexible. And I think with our low carbon grid, we really could have a good go at it through SMEs and have a good impact there. There's also a slight disconnect potentially because of the way we're set up for good reasons historically. So if you look at SME incubators, if we take the APC, which is my area, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, they have their TDAP accelerator, which is great for SMEs. But potentially one of the gaps is how we join up the energy production with the end use. So how much energy they use while they make their products, for example. So yeah, it'd be great to see some movement in those sort of areas, really.
Okay, brilliant.
No problem.
Avi.
Yeah, so I think reflecting on our own experience. So we're a spin out from Loughborough University, and I think a lot of things had to go right for us to be, to spin out quite successfully and raise funding. I think the first one was to bring kind of commercial expertise involved. So Loughborough University hired a consultant called Jonathan Jackson, who really liked what we were doing and eventually became our CEO. And again, there was some really useful expertise that helped us then start to grow. But I think it's trying not to be too complacent. I think there's a lot that the universities can do a lot more of. You know, there has been micro, but I think that should be expanded and widened to have a real, a lot more expertise and an ecosystem, as Faye mentioned, of people that can really get involved and help spin outs. Because I think a lot of academics, like myself, had never been in business before and would have probably made a lot of mistakes otherwise that we, again, luckily didn't make because we had Jonathan involved in the company. I think just trying to help them in the early stages, realizing how much support they need, and also looking also at when you do launch spin-outs, making the terms more investor friendly, I think will go a long way. I think there's so much amazing research and innovation at universities that a lot of it can be commercialized and isn't. And part of that reason is it requires a lot of nurturing that I think, it's certainly worth investment and the time to put into it. I think a lot of universities see it as a bit of a risk to kind of have a spin out being launched, but I think it shouldn't be seen as a risk. It should be seen as something you just have to be doing a lot more of.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you have identified in some of that some of the tensions that exist in terms of universities investing in providing that support, and then also having it investor attractive, because sometimes those two things can be slightly at odds in terms of the money that the universities need to recoup in order to then keep the cycle going in new companies. But that's a problem that's whizzing around the world in terms of something that universities have got to get right. Then finally on this question, Julian.
Sorry, lost my cursor. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. My reflections are very similar that government holds the ring of this at a national level and at a local level. They are the people who have the democratic accountability and responsibility, and also they are, to use a slightly old-fashioned term, the place shapers, as well as spending an awful lot of money on transport and waste and all those sorts of things. So I think having that really good connection, both at the strategic and tactical level with local government, is really important. And then I think it's recognising that, to take the Trent Community Energy Scheme, that's both a technology proposition, but fundamentally it's about understanding how we as humans interact with technology to achieve a societal benefit. And we're going to have to balance that. And whether it's at a government level, whether that's world, national or local level, government has a key role to play in balancing that. You know, is it a techno future or is it a community future? The best future is one that joins the best elements of those two, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, true. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for all of that. So the question from the audience, we've got literally, I think, five or so minutes left. So rather than 2 or 3 things, is there one thing that each of you feels must happen? And you can treat that on whatever scale you want, whether an individual scale, institutional, or more broadly. What's the one thing that must happen for the UK to get anywhere near its net zero target in enough time? So one thing that happened in the next 5 to 10 years that will help us towards that target. So Faye, I'm going to come to you first.
Oh my gosh. I did have 3 and now I feel really bad just choosing
Okay, we'll go with 3. No, go with the 3 if they're quick 3.
I might steal somebody else's, but I doubt it. So my quick 3 were R&D spend, getting that up, and particularly the innovation part in a leveled up kind of way, because I think it's really important that we focus our technologies and solutions on the areas and expertise as in the area. That's 1. Number 2, support with rollout. Getting things rolled out and working out how to finance rollout. It's okay having technologies, but how do you get them rolled out at speed and at scale? And my 3rd one is about the policy agenda. I think we've seen over the last 15 or 20 years or so that the policy development has been at times glacial. I think we're having some smaller delays now, but there's still delays. We need to move at speed to get things organised.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Alistair.
So I would say embedding life cycle analysis and economic analysis into everything that we do as engineers, particularly. Historically, we tend to just get focused on end use, but I think the game's changed now, and sustainability needs to be put front and centre. And actually, I think if we do that with industry, it will give us a chance to get the jump on activities that are abroad. So there's a clear opportunity there.
Okay, thank you. Avi?
I think there's a lot of easy things we can do, but there's also more uncomfortable things we can do. And sometimes for management, both in small, large organizations and government, it's harder for management sometimes to sign off on things. So I think giving employees more of a say, I think very controversial maybe for some organizations, but actually letting employees of every organization have more of a say in how fast they reach net zero and what actions they take to get there. I think it's something that could really be game changing for me.
Okay, thank you. Josh.
Yeah, so definitely echoing Alistair about bringing in the socioeconomic policy analysis and Avi about the involvement. I mean, this is so important. Empower people. People have ideas, so bringing those in and giving pathways for them to take root. If I were going to say one thing that I think we have to say, it's, I guess, sort of someone from my research area of environmental health would say this, but evaluate as we go and improve. So revise and resubmit as we try interventions. We need to look at in a holistic way, how's the technology performing? What's the environmental impact? Taking the social science view, are we working inclusively? Are we making sure to work against rather than amplify inequalities? Are we keeping an eye on public health benefits? So sort of checking as we go, because nothing's going to work perfectly the first time, and I think that's okay. We can't figure it out before we start, but I think having this cycle of revision is somehow we have to embed that as we go through the next 50 years.
Yeah, brilliant. And Julian.
I feel slightly daunted by the thought of getting involved in the domestic agenda, so I'm not going to. I mean, I think obviously, as well as all the things colleagues have been quite rightly mentioned, you know, there is that international dimension that unless we work with India, China, the USA, then we're not going to solve our problems, because, you know, we are only a big player in this big agenda. You know, witness EVs. It's all very well for us to say EVs, but the biggest market for EVs is in China. So, and we need to both export there and also recognise the issues they have there around their infrastructure as well. So I think it's you know, not losing that international and global perspective.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So thank you all. That brings us to the end of this part of our session. I hope those of you in the audience have enjoyed that discussion as much as I have, and I'm sure you'll join me in thanking Faye, Alistair, Julian, Avi and Josh for some fascinating insights into a whole range of different aspects of the path towards net zero. So thank you all for doing that, and at that I'll pass back to Helen.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you everyone for joining us today during Net Zero Week. Hopefully this conversation has led you to kind of consider and think on the importance of collaboration and working in partnership to achieve net zero. We also hope that this is the start of many conversations and collaboration opportunities in the lead up to and after COP26. Please do look out for other activities taking place as part of Net Zero Week across our partnership. We'll also share details of future events as part of MI Planet as we continue conversations in the run up to COP26. And in the meantime, can I encourage you to look out for more details of ERA Vision, which will be a Midlands Energy Conference, which will take place later this year on the 27th and 28th of October in Birmingham. Registration will be opening later this month, so if you look at the ERA website you'll be able to find more details, and across both our websites there'll be more information about other events, our research projects and the work we're doing in partnership. So we hope to continue this conversation with you over the coming months in the run up to COP. And I'll just thank everybody on the panel, thank Adam and Trevor again for their time as keynote speakers, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and wish you enjoyable sunny afternoons. We've got this rare warm weather, so thank you very much for joining us.